Joining us to review some of today's headlines from around the world is Adefemi Akinsoya. Femi, I've not seen you since Harvard. Congratulations on completing your fellowship at Harvard.
Thank you.
Good to have you back.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back. I'm so happy to see the both of you.
It's a pleasure to have you sitting with us this morning. The first time we worked together was in the Bahamas.
Yes, it was.
Seated with you here on the morning.
Absolutely.
You're also welcome.
Oh, you guys have been doing a wonderful job, and congratulations to the both of you for winning an award yesterday. So, I mean, gotta keep up the good work.
Oh,
yes.
Dr. Abati is not here today because of the implications.
I had a feeling. I had a feeling that
because I called him out. Dear Mrs. Abati, once again, we are waiting for him. We expected the implications to come
today,
but we have not seen Dr. Abati. But I know you are going to perform. I have implicit confidence. Dr. Abati, we miss you, by the way.
Yeah,
we do. Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be talking about international news today. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's stay at home here. Start off with This Day newspaper. If we're looking at the cover of This Day newspaper, the story that jumped out at me was one looking at Deposit Bank and how they've been advised to pay all diaspora remittances. And essentially, this will be a focus on same-day settlements. I'm imagining that the idea behind this move is to provide, as the CBN governor put it, conventional methods to tame inflation. Now, I can imagine that this has been welcomed because inflation is catapulting upwards and upwards. But it is interesting to see, first of all, this type of discovery, these types of ideas being put out to the Nigerian people. I mean, to some extent, it could be wishful thinking. It could be an example of proactivity because something must be done to address this issue.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that, Ayo?
All right, so I mean, like you mentioned, and I have to say that I must commend the CBN governor because initially when he came into office, people were looking because he had a huge task on his hands, multiple challenges facing the economy, and he had to find a way to tame the inflation. Tame inflation using obviously monetary tools in his hands. Now, this is part of what is what he's introduced, that settlement remittances will be settled in Naira, and this will help to reduce the pressure on FX. I don't know. I mean, on the surface of things, I think it's a great way to address that in terms of liquidity. Right. But also, it's also the fact that there also has to be a mindset change for the people themselves. Mm-hmm. Nigeria is a highly dollarized economy. Everybody wants. How many people want to have their forex? Holding their forex in hand, it is a store of value for them. It's a way for them to save money. So there has to be also that reducing of appetite for FX. But in terms of the direction, in terms of policies is introduced, so far so good. Earlier today we talked about how the Minister for Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy had said that some of the introductions or the policies that have been introduced had started to see positives. And if you recall, when we spoke to Dr. Yemi Kale as well, he had also mentioned that we asked him to make a comment around what he thought of, in terms of the interventions by the CBN, and he said that yes, things might be difficult initially, but they must be bold enough to stay through, so that they are not stopping or there are no policy reversals, and then losing the trust in the people as to how effective those policies are. So in terms of, I'm optimistic. Let me put it that word cautiously with regards to the direction that this particular CBN governor has taken, and I'm hoping that we'll begin to see the yields and the results in a very short term.
I mean, fingers crossed. Rufai, I know you've got something to mention about this.
So for me, the workability is what I feel very iffy about, and I'll tell you why. And like you said, you're right, it's a very highly dollarized economy. I do not think a lot of people in the system, yes, I know we need to spend our Naira as much as possible, and I'm totally in support of that. And like I keep arguing, I keep a lot of positions in Naira, even to my own detriment, but it's my own sense of nationalism. The truth has to be said. I don't think a lot of people will want to convert their dollar to Naira because we have bastardized our system where we're highly dollarized, and the political class is the cause of the problem. Okay. They are the ones that change money more into dollars positions. They are the ones that have made everything so dollarized, even real estate payments and things like that, highly pegged against the dollar. So to a large extent, they are even the ones that keep this quantum of dollars. It's not us. Oh, probably I go to Western Union, and what do I want to collect? $250, $300 for upkeep and all of that?
It is a struggle.
It's a struggle. So I hope this policy works. The taste of the pudding, they say, is in the eating. But I pretty much doubt that people want, because so what now happens is, they are also the ones that have given room for a market, an arbitrage market, where people can in turn take the dollars and now go to the so-called black market to change at a higher rate.
Right.
So
I mean, it's multifaceted.
So there are a lot of dynamics to it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to another paper? Let's move on to The Punch. We are still talking about the minimum wage. I know that every time we've been working the grounds, whenever we see any type of politician, we are putting microphones in place and asking about what their ideas are as it pertains to the minimum wage. Now, looking at organised labour, they are unhappy with the FEC, that's the Federal Executive Council's decision to step down the memorandum of this report. Organised labour believe that this decision means that we're creating too much room for speculation. Do you agree with them, Rufai?
So for me, yes, I agree with them. I thought the tripartite committee was supposed to do a lockdown job on this. And they did haggle with the organised private sector, and they went back and forth. But there are also some peculiarities going on. The fact that there's been a pushback and a body reaction that the amount finally they've agreed on, the 62,000, is not going to cut it. So the president is also pushing for wild consultation. And when you start to push things up for wild consultation, it's because you want a foot drag. And that's always the historical antecedents of Nigeria. Say, okay, let me push the other stakeholders, because even prior to this time, most of the governors have mooted the idea that we cannot pay. So for him not to be able to take the fall and the blame, he wants to push it up for wilder consultation, but we forget that we're losing time on it. Right. And where is the discipline of some of these state governors? The organized private sector has said, oh, they will reluctantly pay. But where is the discipline? And if they pass it, wouldn't Labour start to fight back and forth? Because the Guardian did a report saying that empirically, the ideal amount should be 104,000.
Right.
So there's a conundrum.
And it does sound, I know we're drastically running out of time, but it does sound like there is some form of appetite from these governors, the two governors that I've been speaking to about this issue. I remember when we spoke to Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu.
An interesting idea around that, as to how it should be implemented. Yeah.
Definitely. And also in Ogun State, they've talked about wanting to solve this problem by being involved in the decision-making process. Yeah. So we will keep our eyes and ears to the ground. All righty.
So let's go to some African stories.
Yes. So we've got one African paper. We'll go to the Business Day South Africa. If we look at the front cover of Business Day South Africa, it's no surprise to see that the riot issues, that is of Kenya, and we will definitely discuss, we have been discussing Kenya's issues with these protests, this finance bill, the seemingly disparity between President William Ruto and his people on this very issue. Initially, there was the conversation that these hikes are set to trigger prosperity to trickle down into the Kenyan people, and that's clearly not happening. And I think we're getting to a point where you cannot take from nothing. So there's that issue there. But what I actually wanted to talk about Business Day is looking at South Africa essentially being at significant risk of terror financing. This is clearly not something that is unique to any country in this, any country on the African continent or around the world. I think it's always clear to make that distinction known. But it did strike up a lot of interest in me to find out what the reasons are behind this risk, what has triggered it, and what types of terrorism have been facing South Africa specifically. So there is that. I know, again, there is a lot that we need to discuss, but if we look at Kenya, for example, going back to Kenya, we don't have a Kenyan paper to refer to, but I know that across the continent, that is one of the bigger issues. And I was listening to the beginning of the morning show, as I usually do, and I did hear the likeness that you both mentioned between what is happening in Kenya and what we saw happen in 2020 here in Nigeria. And we can only hope that the people continue to stay safe. Yeah. I know that I say continue, but we already know that these protests have already turned deadly. Yeah. And that is clearly a concern, and that's a tragedy in and of itself. But the root issue needs to be tackled here. Yeah. And that is really what the people want. And I do think that these taxes on consumer goods, we have to get to a point where consumer goods definitely will always be prey to taxes, but also there has to be some sort of give and take here. If we're looking at alternatives or ideas, perhaps there being tax-free food products on baby food, for example, on fresh food, for example, but to see a tax being put on bread, which is a staple across Kenya, across the African space, we can empathise with those concerns there.
I was actually glad to see you because I made reference to NSAS protest, and I know you did a great job covering the NSAS protest. So you saw it live, you saw the similarities, and you saw, I'm not saying that it's exactly the same, but there are similarities. It's very similar script in terms of agitations by young people, and then it turning violent, and now we see lives that are being lost, unfortunately, in Kenya. You hear this nail on the head. I see there's a newspaper headline I saw by People Daily, Ruto State kills its brave children. And it ties into what I said at the end, that the guns and the bullets that are financed by the taxes of the people should not be used to kill the people themselves.
Absolutely.
There has to be a better way to manage. I would have said that since Nigeria faced something similar in 2020, maybe they should borrow a leaf or two. But there's no lesson to learn from the Nigerian story because we haven't even found a way to close that chapter. So what is the way forward for Africa is the conversation, because we're seeing these things play out. And I still maintain the fact that President William Ruto could have handled it better in order to secure the lives of the young people of Kenya. And that's what's sad in this story.
It is a huge tragedy. So we will be keeping an eye on what's happening in Kenya.
Okay, I know you have to. I wanted to just mute something by saying there's a big similarity between Nigeria and Kenya. And please, if I get the time, Nigeria is also paying heavy taxes on food and consumables. You know how we're paying the tax? We're paying what we call the inflation tax. In the last 1 year, food commodities have gone up by over 30 to 50%. That's the inflation tax. The only difference is the government is officially taxing you and taking that revenue to fund the ostentatious lifestyle of Ruto. Zakayo, as it's called now.
Zakayo,
that's the difference. Zacchaeus in the Bible. So that's just the difference. You can go ahead.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to move now to international papers. If we take a look at our two British papers, I know we've got the Telegraph and the Guardian. Whichever one, it's still the same story I wanted to discuss, which is the state of UK politics, but also you've got a picture of Julian Assange there. He is on his way. If not, if he'll be landing in his native Australia very, very soon. It's been a treacherous journey for him the last time he was in Australia, and we can imagine that he is somewhat relieved to have had his time served, those 5 years, and also pled guilty to this charge. It's somewhat of a legal technicality, an agreement with the US Department of Justice, and then he will make his own way home to Australia. I do think that it's also an example of geopolitics in power here. When we look at the geography of Australia, their position is quite significant. They're over the other side of the world, very close to exactly the Asia-Pacific region, China, Russia. And when we look at international geopolitics, especially when you see America's influence, the fact that they want to keep their eyes on that region, I can imagine they want to keep Australia happy. So I wonder what type of machinations we can see playing out with this release of Julian Assange back to Australia and taking it from there. In addition to that, I do also want to make a very quick mention about politics in the United Kingdom. We are fast approaching a general election, far sooner than anyone really had managed. I know, it's right here.
1 day, 8 days to go.
And our politicians should be preparing. We've got police and all of these questions about gambling and all of the like. It's a complete and utter mess. And that's why I also like to talk about everybody's mess. Because when we talk about politics and the negative side of politics, it always seems to be an African problem. No, we're seeing this chaos everywhere in the world.
Yes.
As we wrap
the
up,
United States, the United Kingdom,
everywhere.
As we wrap up, Femi, I mean, Australia is also part of something called the AUKUS, which is, the Pacific region, joint effort for security and all of that. But as we wrap up, I'm going to make a prediction about the UK election.
Oh, okay. Let me have
it. The quick prediction will be, it will be close to another 97 for Labour, like the one in 97. But 6 months down the line, Keir Starmer will ruin things so much that England will miss Rishi.
So it's a conservative bloodbath for you. They're not saying it
power. They're not. But 6 months down the line, Starmer will ruin things so much.
I don't think Starmer is the solution.
Miss Rishi.
No. I believe that Rishi Sunak is actually a good prime minister, but unfortunately it's Conservatives' time out. They are, next week, Thursday is July 4th, so it's independence from the Conservatives and the Labour Party are coming in, but I don't think Starmer is the answer.
Oh, it's going to be very interesting. Yeah. Going to be very, very interesting. But yes, I agree with you. I do think that the connections people are making between New Labour, it's not what we're seeing here under Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Fran.